from around the world and from CBS News headquarters in New York. This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
Good evening. The new technology has brought a new kind of disaster at sea. When this day began, the largest offshore oil rig ever built was in place in the North Atlantic, towering skyscraper high, about 200 miles off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada. Tonight, except for floating marker buoys, the ocean surface it occupied is empty. There are no signs and little hope that any of the 84 crewmen have survived to tell the tale. Richard Wagner in New York has our report.
Searchers reaching the disaster site at first light this morning reported seeing 2 overturned lifeboats, floating bodies, but no sign of survivors. Weather conditions in the North Atlantic storm remain terrible. Winds up to 80 miles an hour, waves 50 feet high, visibility reduced to a few hundred feet.
We searched for about 2 hours and various debris of the Ranger, I assume, and there was no sign of the Ranger at all.
We received both calls from the supply ships that were out there saying they were in the oil rig's original location and they could not find it.
Launched in 1976, the Ocean Ranger was the biggest offshore drilling rig in the world, longer than a football field, taller than a 35-story building. As bad as the weather was today, the Ocean Ranger was built to take much worse. Winds up to 115 miles an hour and waves 110 feet high. Just last week, the drilling platform listed dangerously, and a crewman was quoted saying an abandoned ship order was given. Mobil Oil of Canada, operators of the rig, confirmed the listing incident, but said it was over in 5 or 10 minutes and was not as serious as reported. Mobil leased the rig from Ocean Drilling and Exploration Company of New Orleans. An ODECO spokesman said today that of the men lost, about 10 are Americans, the rest Canadians. Richard Wagner, CBS News, New York.
There has been heavy fighting in eastern El Salvador during the past 24 hours, but it seemed to subside today. Gary Shepard reports from the scene that the latest major engagement could have gone either way, except for a familiar piece of U.S. military equipment.
If it hadn't been for this Huey helicopter gunship strafing guerrilla positions, yesterday's battle in San Sebastian, only 25 miles from the capital, might not have turned out the way it did. Salvadoran army troops were able to prevent the rebels from overrunning the garrison, finally driving them away. And it may well have been the Huey that gave them the edge. The United States has already shipped in 20 Hueys as part of its aid package, and it's no secret the Salvadoran army wants a lot more in a military situation that nearly everyone here admits is deteriorating. Take last week's army offensive against rebel forces in Usulatan province, for example. 1,000 troops, a unit of artillery, but the guerrillas slipped away. Military analysts say a squadron of gunships could have made a big difference. In the last year of the Carter administration, American aid to El Salvador amounted to only $72 million. In the first year of the Reagan White House, American assistance, both military and economic, soared to $174 million. But these numbers are only pocket change compared to what may be coming. CBS News has learned from a highly reliable source here that the White House wants to make a staggering increase in American aid to this country, raising the total to at least $600 million and perhaps as much as $800 million within the next 18 months. If it gets the additional aid, El Salvador could become the 4th largest recipient of American assistance behind Israel, Egypt, and Turkey. The source says administration planners have confirmed the numbers privately to key members of Congress, even though the Central Intelligence Agency has already told the White House the war here is not winnable militarily without the use of American ground forces. Gary Shepard, CBS News, San Salvador.
An unscheduled intelligence briefing on Latin America brought top officials to the White House on Washington's birthday. Sources say that while the administration is planning vast increases in U.S. economic aid to El Salvador, it has decided against a profound deepening of American military involvement at this time. State Department sources say the White House has concluded that there is no political consensus in Congress or in the country for that type of assistance. U.S. officials say a presidential speech planned for delivery sometime over the next 2 weeks will emphasize the need to improve economic conditions throughout Central America, but will not address the question of whether or not the war can be won in El Salvador. Washington's allies in Europe and in Latin America have been counseling covert action designed to stop the flow of supplies to the guerrillas from Cuba and from Nicaragua and to destabilize the Sandinista regime in Nicaragua. U.S. officials say several Latin American countries are ready to contribute personnel to such operations, but need coordination and intelligence from Washington, and are skeptical of this administration's ability to keep any covert action out of the newspapers. Bob Simon, CBS News, the State Department.
The Salvadoran defense minister today accused U.S. Senators Patrick Leahy and Claiborne Pell of taking a, quote, high-handed attitude during their recent talks with government officials in El Salvador. Leahy and Pell, both Democrats, stopped off in Mexico City today on their way home. In Mexico City, they met with leaders of El Salvador's opposition groups. Leahy and Pell said they felt it was only fair to discuss the issues with spokesmen for the opposition to get what they called a balanced picture. Television's Lou Grant, actor Ed Asner, was in Washington today. He led a group of show business personalities opposed to President Reagan's policy in El Salvador. They announced a campaign to raise $1 million as a donation to Salvadoran rebels. Asner handed over a check for $25,000 to a Mexican doctor who is supposed to use it for the health care system of rebel forces.
This cherished drop of oil of Olay works in mysterious ways to help you look younger. While it softens everywhere, remarkably, oil of Olay seeks out the drier skin that needs it most, imparting precious extra fluids where tiny dry lines may be more apparent, to create a softer, younger, more harmonious look. Discover the secret of oil of Olay. It can help you look younger, too.
Introducing Your Other Wine. New Taylor California Cellars Light Chablis. Perfect when you want something light tasting.
Perfect before dinner.
Your Other Wine. 25% fewer calories than our regular Chablis.
Only 53 calories a glass.
Dry, crisp, delicious.
What a perfect time for my other wine.
When you want something light tasting, try new Taylor California Cellars Light Chablis, Rosé, Rhine. Your Other Wine.
Perfect.
At a meeting of American Legion representatives in Washington today, UN Ambassador Jean Kirkpatrick was asked whether it is worth $5 million a day for the United States to, quote, cast one vote against the world. Her answer was typically outspoken.
We look at what happens in New York, in the Security Council, and in the General Assembly. Then I believe it is a very dismal show. Because the purpose of the central bodies of the United Nations itself, was above all to assist in conflict resolution. And what we find instead is that conflicts, rather than being resolved there, are in fact polarized, extended, and exacerbated.
When Defense Secretary Weinberger was in Jordan last week, there was talk that the U.S. would be willing to sell King Hussein F-16 fighters and Hawk ground-to-air missiles. There has been no announcement on this of any kind, and King Hussein has made no official request. But as Bob Fall reports, that means nothing to Prime Minister Begin of Israel.
Mr. Begin escalated the dispute by leapfrogging everyone and appealing directly and publicly to President Reagan, telling him the possible sale is a grave threat to the security of our people. Because, said Begin, Jordan would use the weapons to prepare for air attacks on Israel. He also argued that Secretary Weinberger's proposals violate the personal commitment which Begin said he received from President Reagan in September, that the United States would preserve Israel's qualitative military superiority in the region. The sale to Jordan would virtually wipe out that advantage, Begin insisted, and by an overwhelming margin of 88-3, members of Israel's parliament agreed with him.
I think that there is an administration belief, I think arising out of a lack of understanding of the situation in the Middle East, that they can buy over the Arabs by selling arms. That's been proved wrong in Iran, and it's tragic to see the United States making the same mistake again.
Pleased by the vote, Begin suggested afterwards that he'd just begun to fight.
Tomorrow I'm going to write a personal letter to President Reagan in order to inform him about this phenomenon of national unity around the problem of our security.
Mr. Begin was not totally persuaded by Secretary of State Haig's recent statements that there has been no change in administration policy, and by issuing what amounts to a personal challenge to the president, Mr. Begin is making it clear that what he now wants is for President Reagan himself to repudiate what Secretary Weinberger had to say. Bob Fall, CBS News, Jerusalem.
Leslie Stahl reports that a top White House official says President Reagan is standing by his promise to preserve Israel's qualitative and quantitative weapons edge in the Middle East. And the official quoted Mr. Reagan as saying that if there should be a Jordan deal, then the next question would be, how can the U.S. make it up to Israel? This Jordan arms issue has served to underline policy differences between two key U.S. officials, Secretary of State Haig and Defense Secretary Weinberger. But in his commentary tonight, Bill Moyer says this kind of thing is really old hat. Bill?
So there are differences between the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense. So what's new? It wasn't long ago that Washington was buzzing over conflicts between Jimmy Carter's National Security Advisor and his Secretary of State. One seemed always spoiling to get tough with the Russians, while the other preferred to negotiate quietly, as most lawyers do. Hardly a Sunday passed that Zbigniew Brzezinski wasn't on one of the interview shows sounding like Muhammad Ali before a championship fight, while Cyrus Vance kept to his desk like an Episcopalian bishop counting the collection. Different men, different strokes. And before them were Henry Kissinger and William Rogers. Rogers, R-O-G-E-R-S. Remember him? He was the fly to Kissinger's spider. He wanted to run the State Department, and Henry wanted to run the world. Kissinger got the world, and Rogers got the boot. That left just Kissinger and Nixon at the top. And then there was one, the lone cowboy to whom President Ford could only play tonto. So it goes in Washington, the making of foreign policy no less contentious than the world itself. We should worry most, perhaps, when conformity reigns. A Kissinger unbounded mesmerized the town even as his policies unraveled. And a president like Johnson orchestrated his advisors into a chorus of assent, which became in time the requiem of defeat. Better the way of Weinberger and Haig. To their credit, they are struggling not for turf alone, but because they see our interests differently. Haig would avoid a crisis over Poland to keep the Atlantic lines intact. Weinberger would press the Soviets hard. The Secretary of Defense thinks America must knit closer ties to friendly Arabs. Haig says our commitment to Israel won't allow it. Well, let them do battle. Of such come alternative views of reality, leaks that inform, and checks that balance.
In Colombia, South America, it is a tradition to celebrate the Day of the Farmer. To celebrate for men like Juan Valdez, who for centuries have gone to the fields to pick by hand only the coffee beans that are ready, because it is their dedication to the heritage of Colombian coffee that makes it the richest coffee in the world. And that is worth celebrating.
Polydent presents Martha Ray, TV star, denture wearer.
You know, when I clown in front of that camera, this big smile needs something extra. Extra strength Polydent Green. It gets my dentures sparkling clean. Watch, tough lab stains. Now, extra strength Polydent. It's fantastic. Gets tough stains clean, even in between. So take it from a big mouth. Extra strength Polydent Green gets tough stains clean.
First Lady Nancy Reagan has been criticized in recent months for her social activities. But today she set out to show her concern with social problems. Deborah Potter has the story in Tampa, Florida.
It's the First Lady's first major trip alone since President Reagan took office. A two-day swing through Florida and Texas to look at 4 different programs dealing with drug abuse. First stop, a St. Petersburg elementary school where problem kids aged 9 through 12 are involved in a special program called Alpha.
Given every opportunity to build their self-esteem, which we consider as one of the most important goals of the Alpha Counseling Program.
This program and the others Mrs. Reagan will visit have 2 things in common: no federal funding and an emphasis on parent involvement.
I know if it wasn't for the program, Johnny probably wouldn't pass school this year.
If you can get your child at a point where you think maybe he might be, or she might be, having a little trouble, then that's a great thing that you're doing, and certainly will be of such value to your child and to you later on, and will bring you closer together.
White House officials say Mrs. Reagan isn't endorsing any of the programs she's visiting. As one official put it, the whole object is to make people aware. And the view is that if it helps Mrs. Reagan shed some of her image as concerned only with high fashion and the White House china, so much the better. Deborah Potter, CBS News, Tampa, Florida.
On the Columbia River, 30 miles north of Portland, Oregon, a 600-foot-long freighter filled with grain has been burning since Sunday night. The West German ship Protector Alpha was rocked by an explosion earlier today. 6 persons were injured, 3 in the explosion, 3 from smoke. The fire, cause still unknown, began in the engine room and spread quickly. The Coast Guard towed the freighter away from the grain terminal where it was taking on oil.
When Sharp replaced 300,000 transistors and diodes with this tiny chip, it opened a whole new world of wonders. Like taking a big copier and everything it can do and making it into one of the smallest any paper copiers in the world. Introducing the Sharp SF750 copier. The Sharp SF750, a very small, very big idea. And where do big ideas like this come from? From sharp minds come sharp products.
Mr. Collins, I have hemorrhoids.
If you don't use Preparation H, you could be missing medication that helps shrink swelling.
Helps shrink swelling? That's important to me.
It should be. Preparation H has an exclusive formula that helps shrink swelling of inflamed hemorrhoidal tissues and often gives fast, temporary relief from pain and itch flare-ups.
Relieves pain and itch, helps shrink swelling. I'll use Preparation H.
Exclusive formula Preparation H relieves pain and itch, even helps shrink swelling.
Wayne Williams' murder trial was cut short today when an intestinal virus forced him to leave the Atlanta courtroom. Williams, who is accused of killing 2 young blacks, was treated during lunch break at a hospital. He returned to the courtroom but became ill again. The judge then recessed the trial for the day. The AFL-CIO responded today to President Reagan's challenge to provide an alternative to his proposed budget. Meeting at Bal Harbour, Florida, the union's top officials said they would do this: restore $41 billion in social programs cut by the president and add $23 billion in jobs programs. But the labor leaders would trim defense spending by $33 billion, and they say they'd pay for any additional budget costs with a revised tax structure, including fewer tax breaks for people and corporations in the high brackets. Well, after President Reagan recently made public his 1983 budget, he said complainers in Congress would find that the folks back home back him. And as Susan Spencer reports from Dallas, Democrat Ralph Hall found that at least in his district, Mr. Reagan was correct.
No, the president said he wasn't worried that Congress seems to have given his budget the thumbs down.
When they get home, they're going to find out how much the people want what we have proposed.
How do you feel about Reagan's budget cuts? You know, we're going into another year, and I'm making the rounds trying to find out what people want me to do.
Hang
Hanging?
him.
Well, that's pretty blunt and to the point.
Fortunately for Democrat and Reagan supporter Ralph Hall, very few people in his district want such drastic action. This is, after all, Reagan country. North and east of Dallas, the 4th Congressional District is like a lot of Texas. Good farmland, cowboy hats, country music, a growing number of Republicans, and a lot of worry about Reaganomics.
I'll just introduce you, Ralph, and let him make the little prayer. He'll pray for interest rates to get cheaper.
But at this breakfast with bankers and developers, where there seemed as many diamonds as cowboy hats, interest rates were no laughing matter.
We're headed towards a situation where nobody will have any money to function at all except the federal government.
Like many of the boll weevils, the Democrats who deserted their party to vote with the president when it counted last year, Congressman Hall was casting about for answers.
Reagan has to do more than improve on Carter. Reagan now has to improve on Reagan.
But good old Ralph, as the folks here called him, got no suggestions as to exactly how the president ought to do that. Only general agreement that the deficit is too big, that defense might have to be cut. The blame for current economic woes was put on anybody but Ronald Reagan, on Wall Street, Congress, and especially on Paul Volcker and the Federal Reserve.
The Congress doesn't either change him and get someone in the Fed that's in step with the Congress, or either the Congress get in step with the Fed, we're gonna veer off the highway and we're gonna be in a heap of trouble.
In the small towns of his district, Congressman Hall found fewer diamonds, but almost as much support for Ronald Reagan. For the record, there were some Democrats at Cullen's grocery store in Heath. They didn't like the budget cuts or the economic program. But nobody who said he had voted for Reagan a year ago told the congressman to stop voting with the president now. That included car dealers who are hurting even in Texas.
We all of us gonna have to do without some things that you know, we might have thought were good, and I think that's a step in the right direction. I like what he's doing.
The Keep the Faith theme held at a meeting with home builders, who seemed too dazzled with the Reagan style to give up on the substance just yet.
Any president since Roosevelt would have been hung by now for what Reagan has done. Because he scared a bunch of people, yet they still like him.
I think that most people are sticking with him because they really believe, like he was just saying, that the president's trying his best to figure out something that's going to work for us, and everybody knows it's screwed up and we need some help.
Democrat Hall says he will listen to anybody's suggestions on how to get it unscrewed up. But it's clear that despite the doubts, the political percentage for this boll weevil is with the president, at least for now. Susan Spencer, CBS News, Dallas.
Noah Dietrich, longtime chief aide to the late Howard Hughes, died today in a Palm Springs hospital. Noah Dietrich, who was 92, had suffered from heart problems for several years. For 32 years, Dietrich was chief operating officer for the business affairs of the reclusive Hughes, who amassed a fortune estimated at $2 billion. Dietrich, who was fired by Hughes in 1957, later wrote a biography of his former employer. That book became the basis for Clifford Irving's bogus autobiography of Howard Hughes. Japan's trade surplus with the United States continues to grow. Latest figures show Japanese exports to this country were up more than 16% over December. On the other hand, imports from the U.S. rose less than 1%. So the January trade surplus for Japan was about $600 million. The American government has been trying to get Japan to reduce its protection of home markets, at least a little, to reduce the growing trade imbalance. So far, the Japanese have successfully resisted doing much of that. The stock markets were closed today in observance of George Washington's birthday.
Are you a saltaholic? Do you think most everything needs salt? Then you're a saltaholic. Like most Americans, you eat more than 20 times the salt your body needs. Now, with new No Salt, you can have the flavor of salt without salt. No Salt tastes like salt, but there's no salt in No Salt. You can shake No Salt, cook with No Salt, No Salt, and shake the salt habit.
Welcome back, Joe. You've been away long, but your feelings for her are still running strong. The sharply blunt moments.
It's been a long time, Joe.
You look terrific.
Ah, the joy of sharing yellow wine.
When are you leaving?
I'm not.
Share the joy of yellow wine.
The old question about two New York-based department stores used to be, does Macy's tell Gimbel's? Now watch as David Culhane explains what Gimbel's is telling Gimbel's.
Gimbel Brothers in New York City, one of 38 department stores the company operates in the Northeast and the Middle West. They've been in business now for 140 years. And this is Jack Gimbel. No relation, but he does operate a few small shops in Booth Bay Harbor, Maine. And one of them, just one, is called Gimbel & Sons Country Store. Jack never had any dealings with the giant Gimbel chain, but one day he got a letter from a lawyer. It was Gimbel versus Gimbel.
The letter says, among other things, your use of the name Gimbels is likely, in our view, to cause confusion, mistake, and deception of the general public and the trade.
Gimbel & Sons is a ground-floor, summer-only gift shop for tourists, selling fudge, souvenirs, and a few boat clothes. It's been going strong under that name for 10 years.
One thing I have to get straight first now. Is your name really Gimbel?
For 46 years, it's been Jack Gimbel.
Booth Bay Harbor has about 3,000 people. They say this is the biggest story around since Frank Sinatra was in town to make a movie almost 30 years ago. Jack's neighbors have registered their support with newspaper ads, and they've even started a legal defense fund.
Everybody knows Jack Gimbel. You know, he's Jack Gimbel, and he has a perfect right to call the store Gimbel's if he wants.
Well, did Jack name the store Gimbel's just to get some free publicity? He says absolutely not.
We thought if we were picking the name for a store, we wouldn't have selected Gimbel's. We most likely would have selected a name like Bloomingdale's or Altman's or one of the fine stores.
The Gimbel in Maine ran an ad making it clear that his place is not associated with the Gimbel in New York. But that won't do it. The lawyer for the New York Gimbel declined an interview, but he did say that his client would settle if the Maine store could just be called Jack Gimbel & Sons. They'd even pay for the new sign.
Well, I don't think you can negotiate a matter of principle. And I think the bottom line in this particular case is that we believe that we're right and that they're absolutely wrong.
One of Jack Gimbel's neighbors summed it up for the town with a poem published in the local paper. It said in part, "If dear Jack Gimbel had been born a Bimble, or Jones, or Smith, or Tripp, there'd be no agitation, no indiscreet litigation." David Culhane, CBS News, Booth Bay Harbor.
And that's the CBS Evening News this Monday. Dan Rather reporting from New York. Thank you for joining us. Good night.
Normally, when trees are grown and replanted, there's only a 50% survival rate. But with these trees, there's a 95% survival rate. Because these trees are grown underground in an environment that's ideal for plant growth. And an essential part of that environment are special Sylvania lights, which help the young trees thrive.
G.
No, GTE.
I'm too tired for this trick.
What's wrong, Joe?
Not enough sleep. His doctor says it's too much caffeine after dinner.
Oh, you should drink Sanka brand decaffeinated coffee.
That's real coffee or nothing.
Sanka's 100% real coffee. Try it.
Delicious. Yay!
What a show.
I get more sleep since I got Sanka into my act.
Sanka decaffeinated coffee. Enjoy your coffee and enjoy yourself.
From around the world and from CBS News headquarters in New York, this has been the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
I'm Diane Sawyer. The news doesn't stop overnight, and Charles Kuralt and I will be here to bring you up to date tomorrow and every weekday on Morning.
This is CBS.
There's been an arrest in the murder of a Cheatham County deputy. That story coming up next on Eyewitness News.
From Television 5, this is Eyewitness News, weather, and sports.
Good evening, everybody. Jan Ryan is off tonight. I'm Chris Clark.
I'm Ruth Ann Leach. Here's the news.
A Kingston Springs man was arrested in Dallas, Texas this morning and charged with the murder of Cheatham County Sheriff